Hey gang, so I noticed on my trip to America last year that people from the US dressed pretty differently than people from Hong Kong. In the words of my good friend, they had their own individual avatar. And I agree with that. When I returned to Hong Kong, I realized the way I dress changed with the culture over in the US as well. I had, adopted it. And as a relatively wealthy private school kid who's pretty whitewashed, it naturally led me to question, how did upper-class Hong Kong women's fashion adapt under British colonization? Did they dress more like the British? Or did they preserve the traditional Hong Kong culture? Or both? Disclaimer, I'm also just exploring the time period between approximately 1860 and 1960. Yeah. Circa 1840. Qing Dynasty China was ruled predominantly by the Manchus, a formerly nomadic tribe from the region beyond the northern frontier of China, later known as Manchuria. Regions like Hong Kong operated as a traditional, localized farming and fishing society. Hong Kong also had a very diverse set of indigenous people, with the Manchus, Hakka, Holko, Kunti, etc. Because the nature of working in Hong Kong, fishing and stuff, the fashion wasn't too grandiose, it was practical. The Manchus, having been hunters, had developed their style of clothing from characteristics of the skins of animals they hunted, though most ethnic groups, women, men, and children opted to wear the sampu daily. It's a genetic term formed of sam meaning the upper garment and fu meaning the trousers. It was the outfit most commonly worn by Chinese people in Hong Kong. But Francine, we're talking about upper class, no? Okay, yeah, I'm getting to that. Remember when I mentioned the Holko people? Yeah, they're pretty significant too, because they shaped the Ming Dynasty as vital merchants, sailors, and artisans hundreds of years back. Though conquered by the Manchus soon after, they still dominated maritime trade networks. The Punti people were simply the original inhabitants of Hong Kong in the Pearl River Delta. They were extremely sophisticated and showed to form complex social structures early in history. And lastly, we have the Hakka people, a prominent subgroup of Han Chinese, famous for their history of migration. They migrated to Hong Kong during 1840 due to the Chinese Civil War. And fun fact, the name Hakka literally translates to guest families or guest people, referring to their status as newcomers. With that context, it was usual for Hakka women to wear a wider, longer sam, while the more sophisticated Punti women wore a shorter fitted style with a higher collar. The style of sam worn by Holko women changed little over the last 50 years. It was more fitted than that worn by the Punti or Hakka. It was distinguished by its deeply curved hem and edging of a contrasting color. But in general, there was no clear division between upper or lower classes during this time, as nothing was industrialized heavily yet. But I guess the closest thing you got to a working class were the Hakka, who often had fishing jobs, and the more quote-unquote sophisticated being the Manchus and the Holko. But of course, that changed when the British first colonized Hong Kong, there was nothing that changed a lot. However, there were also small subtle changes like the formation of an upper, middle, and lower class. They were starting to be more apparent, and it reflected on their fashion. Unmarried women wore trousers with their sam, whereas middle and upper class women hid their trousers under a skirt. This skirt was the early form of the cheongsam, which I will elaborate on later. Foot binding was also prevalent within the upper class, as the lower class had to do a lot of manual work in the fields and water, so they couldn't afford it. But when the British came, it also began to decline. Basically, for the majority of the 1840s, Hong Kong's upper class fashion was sharply divided between the newly arrived British colonial elite and wealthy Chinese merchants. Western Victorians wore tight corsets and voluminous layers, while affluent Chinese donned intricate Manchu-influenced alquin and silks, creating a unique east-west sartorial landscape. But for a more specific example, we could begin to see the signs of cultural exchange in the early 19th century robe retrieved by the British Museum. It is inherently Chinese in cutting and design. However, small details like the embroidery show a different picture. There are intricate trade ships and metal buttons, things that can only be gained through trade. This was also evidence that times were changing and culture was rubbing off, though there weren't that many big changes in fashion until during the 1920s to the 1930s, the cheongsam was beginning to evolve. It looked like this. Women had their clothes made from helpers, and the cheongsam just emerged as a symbol of Chinese women's liberation, evolving from loose, modest Manchu robes into a fitted feminine garment, which with shortened hemlines, a nipped waist, and daring side slips. It was frequently adopted by female students and socialites as a protest against conservative gender norms. Arguably, this could be attributed to the British. At the time, they were undergoing massive societal changes with women's rights. For example, in 1918, women gained the right to vote in parliamentary elections. This could have rubbed off, but there is also the fact that more Shanghainese tailors were beginning to flood into Hong Kong for business opportunities. With that, they also bring upon Western ideals into fashion in Hong Kong. From the 1940s to 1950s, the cheongsam was still in fashion. Though women still primarily had their clothes made from helpers, factory girls would wear simple tunics with bias lapels and trousers. But for the more affluent Chinese women, you could see these intricately tailored and form-fitting cheongsams with floral accents. This image was spread by celebrities like Ling Dai, where she was often seen wearing lavish, detailed, and colorful cheongsams, and the other with tight-fitted, simple tops with flared skirts. People could purchase these simple casual pieces at two major department stores at the time, Wing On and Sincere, which, fun fact, still exists today. In the 1960s, manufacturing and trade developments were commencing in the swinging 60s. Hong Kong's economy was really beginning to flourish, with fashion buyers from all over the world coming to the city to buy fabrics and place orders on completed designs. Hong Kong was picking up on an influx of international information and started making garments for a lot of international brands, which is an early sign of homogeny. Take the mod look, originating from London. It was a style characterized by tailored slim-cut suits, minimalist geometric shapes, bold color blocking, and A-line mini dresses. A celebrity that popularized it in Britain could be Twiggy. A celebrity that popularized this in Hong Kong could also include Connie Chan Po Chu, with her polka dot, pastel, and color blocking dresses, all brought together by headbands. At this time, cheongsams were still in fashion, but their popularity began to decline, while the desire to have more Western-styled clothing grew exponentially, and tailors adapted their skills to meet the demand. And that's it. That's 1960. But with the evidence so far, I could say, yeah, over the course of 100 years, upper-class Hong Kong women's fashion did adapt under British colonization. We could see that with the mod look and everything, though subtle details like cutting, shape, dress length, etc., still persist. Eventually, homogeneity kicked in the 1960s. We followed the global trends more as globalization expanded. It just so happened that Western powers had more influence at that time. However, I don't want to leave this video making you think, oh, so basically the culture was stripped away from Hong Kong. No, it's not that simple. It's never that simple. I did some deep research and found that a cultural exchange of sorts occurred throughout history. For instance, during the late 19th century, chinoiserie was a fashion trend in Europe. It was characterized by a decorative style where designers imitated and adapted East Asian luxury goods, especially Chinese-looking motifs, but often through fantasy rather than accurate knowledge. It was very beautiful in my opinion, all over France at the time, but fundamentally, I think a good way to express how Chinese it was, say, orange chicken, or this. We also had a resurgence of chinoiserie in 1980. A prominent icon that helped facilitate this was Princess Diana for wearing a Qing Dynasty Ma Meiquan just prior to announcing her engagement to Prince Charles. She also embraced Eastern-inspired silhouettes during her royal tours of Asia. We can also see this in the fall 2004 satin evening dress in Chinese dragon print by Tom Ford for YSL. Or even now, I'd argue. Sometime in 2026 this year, Adidas released the Chinese New Year jacket, featuring Chinese motifs like the knot button, and also incorporating Western elements like the denim material and the baggy cut. It caused a lot of backlash on cultural appropriation, but as someone who is Chinese, I honestly couldn't care less. I don't think it's disrespectful, but the influencer girlies love it, and honestly, I kind of do too. I have one, but that's it. I guess with how much globalization has made things homogenized, we could still see the amazing effects of cultural exchange shine through. And thank you for watching my video. Bye, gang!